Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, friends and neighbors, brothers and sisters. Sitting out here on a cool, almost cold April evening. We tried to go out earlier today. It was cloudy and windy. And I was reminded today, and last few weeks actually, but today especially, of a poem that I've always loved by T.S.Eliot called The Wasteland. And while I'm waiting to figure out what to read next, because I don't really yet know what I want to read next with you, I thought maybe I'd read at least some of The Wasteland, maybe not all of it, but some of it. It's a great poem, one of T.S. Eliot's greatest poems, and was called the greatest poem of the 20th century by some folks. So T.S. Eliot was an American. I think he was from Missouri originally, and he was the son of a brick-making family. So he was set to inherit a great deal of financial security, should we say, and he gave it up because he wanted to go to England, thinking England was more exotic, more romantic in a way. He wanted that English life, something greater than this mundane brick-making stuff. And he went over to England and he got married to a lovely British girl, and unfortunately he ran into a foul of Bertrand Russell, who was one of the leading atheist intellectuals of the 20th century, early 20th century. And Bertrand Russell was also quite the womanizer. And Bertrand set T.S. Eliot and his wife, Vivian, set them up to live in a house, paid for their bills, things like that. And then he went about his womanizing with T.S. Eliot's wife, apparently. And it really, I think it hurt Eliot very badly to realize he'd not only been cuckolded, but cuckolded by the man who had taken care of them financially. And eventually he conspired to get his wife committed to an insane asylum. And, well, anyway, a lot of this poem has to do with that, but it also has to do with the changes that were occurring in society, in English and European society, in the early part of the 20th century. 1922, so right after the war, right after the First World War, 1914 to 1918. And he incorporates into this poem a great deal of references to Western culture, Western literature, many of which most readers can't access now at all, couldn't access even during his day without footnotes. Consequently, the references seem very obscure, but I think that's part of Eliot's point, because I think Eliot was creating a poem here that was supposed to reveal how cut off from our past we are. And it's like what C.S. Lewis points out with the Great Divide, not the Great Divorce, the Great Divide, where he talks about how the generations up until the 1920s shared together a heritage that goes way, way, way back, so that an ancient Greek had more in common with a man in the 1850s than a man in the 1900s had with a man in the 1930s. Lewis said there was that big a divide, cut off from our heritage and our culture. And I think Eliot felt that intensely there in England, where he thought he was going to find high culture, and he found really just misery and disappointment working as a bank clerk there in London. So he makes reference here to all sorts of works, Dante Alighieri, for instance, and he makes reference to Arthurian stories. He makes reference to Greek literature. He makes reference to Tiresias and the theme of Tiresias' conversion. He makes reference to Chaucer, one of the great English poets of the 1300s. So if one doesn't know all these references when you read this poem, the poem seems very strange and very, very obscure, especially on a first read. And even if you do know the references, there's a lot in the poem which is hard to fathom. Now, I'm going to read it, I think, tonight, at least some of it, like I said. I'm going to read it tonight as one who loves the poem. I don't read it as somebody who is going to explain everything, and I don't want to read it as somebody who says, I know all the references, nor can I say that I know all the languages, because he incorporates Italian and German and French, into Latin, Greek, into the poem. I can't claim that I can pronounce all of those correctly. So that's sort of a caveat here, that if you're watching this and you speak fluent German, well, Entschuldigung. So this was written after Eliot had made friends with Ezra Pound, the great poet Ezra Pound, 20th century. And he makes a reference to Ezra Pound here at the opening. And one thing I know for sure is that the opening of the poem, which has gone down in literary history as one of those more famous openings, is also a trope or a reference to Geoffrey Chaucer. Chaucer's poem, The Canterbury Tales, begins when April, with his sweet showers, has pierced to the root and bathed all in sweet liquor, then man longs to go on pilgrimages. Okay, in Middle English, that appear with the sure suit, the drought of March hath passed to the root, and bathed every root, and swish the cure of which engendered is a fleur, when zephyrs eke with their sweat breath hath instilled in every holt, and hath the younger crops, and the sun hath his course in the Ramadan. Then pricketh, and then the small birds that maketh melody, which all the next doth sleep with open ye, then pricketh him in his garages, and go on man on pilgrimages. From every shearer's end of England they wended to Canterbury. The holy bliss for Martyr for the sake for him that helped them when that they were sick. Middle English kind of sounds like ours, but not quite. So anyway, at the very opening here, Eliot is making reference to that poem, because Chaucer is saying that, look, when April comes and it gets warm, people who have been cooped up inside the whole time want to go outside, and they want to see other humans, and they want to frolic, and they want to frisk about. And he couches it in the sort of tongue-in-cheek, like they really want to go and be religious, and go on pilgrimages. And as we find, most of the pilgrims aren't really there for the religion part. But the pilgrimage was something which people engaged in. They got outside, they went to these holy sites and shrines. It was a happy, kind of festive affair, full of religious connection and connection to the past, and a rebirth after a long winter. So Eliot is making reference to that at the very beginning, that April is a month which stirs us into new life and makes us have to come alive after a long period of being asleep. So without further ado, I have my T.S.Eliot here, the complete poems that I picked up for a song and a dance, because everything's going digital now, so people are throwing books out like a rally in Germany in the 1930s. And I have my fortification, so hopefully you have yours and you're ready to go. So here we go. This is The Wasteland by T.S.Eliot, 1922. Nam sibilam quidem cumis ego ipse oculis meis vidi in ampula pendere, et cum illi pueri dicerent. Sibula te thales, respondebat illa, epothenein thelo. For Ezra Pound, Il Milior Fabro. Part 1. The Burial of the Dead. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tubers. Summer surprised us, coming over the Starnberger See with a shower of rain. We stopped in the colonnade. I went on in sunlight into the Hofgarten and drank coffee and talked for an hour. Bin gar kein Russen, stamm aus Litauen echt Deutsch. And when we were children, staying at the Archduke's, my cousins, he took me out on a sled, and I was frightened. And he said, Marie, Marie, hold on tight, and down we went. the mountains. There you feel free. I read much of the night, and I go south in the winter. What are the roots that clutch? What branches grow out of this stony rubbish? Son of man, you cannot say or guess, for you know only a heap of broken images where the sun beats, and the dead tree gives no shelter, the cricket no relief, and the dry stone no sound of water. Only there is shadow under this red rock. Come in, under the shadow of this red rock, and I will show you something different from either your shadow at morning, striding behind you, or your shadow at even rising to meet you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. Frisch weht der Wind der Heimat zu, mein Irisch Kind, wo weilest du? You gave me hyacinths first a year ago, and they called me the Hyacinth Girl. Yet when we came back late from the hyacinth garden, your arms full and your hair wet, I could not speak, and my eyes failed. I was neither living or dead, and I knew nothing. Looking into the heart of light, the silence. Oren leer das Meer. Madame Sosostris, famous clairvoyant, had a bad cold. Nevertheless, is known to be the wisest woman in Europe, with a wicked pack of cards. Here, said she, is your card. The drowned Phoenician sailor. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Look. And here is Belladonna, the Lady of the Rocks, the Lady of Situations. Here's the man with 3 staves, and here the wheel, and here's the one-eyed merchant, and this card, which is blank, is something he carries on his back, which I'm forbidden to see. I do not find the hanged man. Fear death by water. I see crowds of people walking round in a ring. Thank you. If you see dear Mrs. Equitone, tell her I bring the horoscope myself. One must be so careful these days. Unreal city. Under the brown fog of a winter dawn, a crowd flowed over London Bridge. So many. I had not thought death had undone so many. Sighs short and infrequent were exhaled, and each man fixed his eyes before his feet, flowed up the hill and down King William's Street, where St. Mary Woolnoth kept the hours, with a dead sound on the final stroke of 9. And there I saw one I knew, and I stopped him, saying, Stetson, you who were with me at the ships of Malai. That corpse you planted last year in your garden, has it begun to sprout? Will it bloom this year? Or has the sudden frost disturbed its bed? Now keep the dog far hence, that's friend to men, or with his nails he'll dig it up again. You hypocrite lecture, mon semblable, mon frère.